The local government minister Ajia Alima Mahama has assured steps are being put in place to ensure that 38 new districts to be created do not struggle with basic infrastructure like office space. She says adequate provisions have been made in the 2018 budget for these ministries. Government has laid before Parliament legal instruments seeking to create 38 new districts across the country. A number of other districts are also being elevated to the status of a municipality. Ms. Mahama spoke to the media outside Parliament House today.
There are some districts that have grown. You know, we started district assemblies in 1988. Some districts' populations have even doubled. You'll be surprised. So, and the essence of our local government system is to ensure that the persons, all persons in the district participate in the governance process and feel part of the governance system. So we decided to increase the number of districts. The districts that are big, divide them into other districts. So, for example, you have Savulgu Nantong Municipal Assembly. It includes Nantong constituency and Savulgu constituency, so that you have Nantong as its district and Savulgu would stay as municipal. But in doing that, we have to come with an LI for Savulgu because we are changing its boundaries, and an LI for Nantong. That's why the LIs look so many. And the municipal assemblies, so municipals have certain population categories. And in our development process, we would tend to have secondary cities and have different sort of resources to help them support their development in the secondary cities. So if you have municipal status, it enables you access certain resources. You know about, we have some donor programs that look at development of secondary cities, and they will fall within the municipal category. So if our municipals, some district centers have grown big, it's important that we elevate them to municipal standards so that they can also focus on the development of their areas. So we have some districts that the president has elevated into municipals. So in those instances, they are not new assemblies, and we are not creating new assemblies. It's just elevating their status to municipal. So that category is there.
Ajia Alima Mahama is the Minister for Local Government. Their Deputy Minority Leader, James Abeji, says despite the expected hike in government administration cost, he is confident that the move will accelerate local development. All right, parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku Gakpo has been speaking with him. He joins me live now. Hello, Joseph.
Hello,
it doesn't seem to be to me that there's any serious or strong resistance coming from the minority on this matter.
Not at all, not at all. They are to a large extent convinced that the fundamental principle behind the processes to establish these new districts, 38, ensure further development, particularly in the rural areas. James Kluchaveji's concern only has to do with the district assemblies that are being elevated to the status of municipal assemblies, and well, he thinks that that may not be necessary because it may only amount to a change of name without any attendant change when it comes to how much money the assembly earns from the district assembly common fund and how developmental projects are undertaken generally. But one brief concern that came up from, well, one of the members on the minority side, the NDC MP for the Amasaman constituency, that Eric Neokai, has to do with issues about possible gerrymandering. He makes the point that he thinks that his district is large enough and that it should be divided, but you know, he's cautioning against any attempts to introduce the creation of any sort of fresh constituencies and even the demarcation of his constituency and changing the boundaries and all, which may affect him electoral wise or anything like that. That's what he's cautioning against.
Well, let's focus on the bill, on the instrument that they've brought to Parliament right now. Wrap up with that, the conversation with that. What happens from now? You know, now that they've brought it to Parliament, what's the way forward? From now, where do we go?
So you know, there are 94 legislative instruments that were actually brought to Parliament that focus on the specific district assembly. So, for example, The legislative instruments having to do with the establishment of the Savelugu Municipal Assembly is one of those that's been introduced that will help ensure that it's upgraded from a district to a municipal status. It's expected that this is a document that's been laid in the House. It's been referred to the Subsidiary Legislation Committee of Parliament. They would look at it. They are supposed to allow for 21 sitting days when it comes to Parliament's work generally. And once the 21 days pass, this legislative instrument will then have matured, and then officially it could be announced that these districts have been created. It's not something that may end up coming to the floor of Parliament for any form of debate. The expectation is that once the Subsidiary Legislative Committee looks at it and they think there's a problem, they would have to refer it back to the executive arm of government for it to be amended and brought back. But if they have no concerns about that, after 21 days, then officially these districts would have been deemed to have been established. Okay, with very little resistance coming from the minority, this sounds like a done deal. Joseph, thank you so much for that update there. Joseph Opoku Gakpo is our parliamentary correspondent, bringing us up to speed. So just so you know, 38 new districts being created. And away from that, the 9-member commission of inquiry set up by President Akufo-Addo to facilitate the creation of additional regions is set to begin its first public hearing from petitioners for the new regions. 6 petitions have already been received by the commission ahead of a referendum set for 2018. Minister for Regional Reorganization Dan Butchie has been addressing the media this morning on the work of the commission so far.
They sent to them, they have gone through, they have been meeting, perusing it, but they should come and explain to them more. This is the purpose for the sitting in Accra. The 6 sittings they are going to have in Accra is for that purpose. After that, they will move to their regions and get to know. Because if you go to what do you call it? The constitutional provisions of Article 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4 that are read, their purpose is that, for example, 5.4 says that the commission should find out whether there's a substantial need. Is there a need and a substantial demand for the creation? 5.4, where a commission of inquiry appointed under clause 2 or 3 of this article finds that there's the need and the substantial demand for the creation, alteration, or merger referred to in either of those clauses, it shall then recommend to the president that the referendum to be held. This actually is the purpose for this meeting. But since I took you from the earlier engagement that some of you were even aware, maybe I should as well continue. After these engagements, 5.4 states that the commission shall recommend to the president that a referendum be held, specifying the issues to be determined by the referendum and the places where the referendum should be held. This is what the Constitution says. 5.5.
On the issue of how much it will cost government to create the new regions, the minister, Dan Butchie, says they are yet to come up with a budget.
State institutions, they submit their budget as and when they are assigned a responsibility to do. For example, in the course of this work, we felt that an institution like the National Commission for Civic Education should be abreast of what is going on. They should understand the processes and they should be able to explain to the people, because many people did not even know that the Constitution actually addresses this matter. And all sorts of people had all sorts of interpretations, you know, surprisingly, even very learned people. So we felt that no, people should be educated about this. So we have met the commission. In fact, they had a seminar somewhere in Kwewu where all the regional directors and staff were there, and we went and had interaction with them. And we are trying to engage them to undertake public education exercise. That, for example, I cannot tell you how much it will cost. They will have to do that. The next one is the commission's work. I mean, as they move to the regions, if you are talking about fuel and accommodation and those logistics. Right. Then the next major one is the work of the Electoral Commission. As they conduct the referendum, how much it will cost to conduct the referendum. Exactly. So these are things that will come from those state institutions.